Hi there, Avian Science. I hope everybody's doing well today. Looks like a lot of people are running a little bit late. I guess oh, is it nice out today? That makes sense. It's very nice out today here as well. So we've got a snow leopard in this image. This is one of the easiest snow leopard finding pictures that I have ever seen. And the snow leopard is right there. Nice and easy to find. Okay, so I want to remind you guys, we've got a couple of sets of assignments due this weekend. Some are due tomorrow, some are due on Sunday. Our last class is coming up very fast, and that'll be on May 4th, which is 2 weeks from today. Wow. Okay. So I had a request that Jessica wanted to go first, and I think she said where is that? Her presentation is in my inbox. So let me make sure that let me open it up. Okay, it's going to require me to download it, so hang on a second. Sorry, I didn't get this organized before class. Ooh.
All right, hi, Avian Science. My name is Jessica Drew. And
okay, I've got it. So let me just set up the screen share. This is not your fault, Jessica. It's me messing up and not being as prepared as I should be. Okay, not a problem. All right. Okay, so you guys should be seeing a screen with a barn owl on it. Oh, I can blame it on the nice day. Thanks for that, because yeah, it's nice here too. All right, here we go.
My project is going to be on the barn owl. I'm going to go over some brief history about them before I start getting into some of the other cool facts that I found about them. So barn owls are the most widely distributed species of owls in the world, with 10 subspecies inhabiting every continent except Antarctica. They are considered the oldest owl in the world. The oldest known species of barn owl is 20 to 25 million years old, and these were found in Cuba as well as Italy. These birds are called the common barn owl to help separate it from other species within its family, named, I'm definitely going to pronounce this incorrectly, Titanadia. There are three major lineages of barn owls. There is the Western barn owl of Europe, Western Asia, and Africa, the Eastern barn owl of Southeastern Asia and Australasia, and then the American barn owl of the Americas. When looking back into some history, it seems that barn owls have a very big imprint in a lot of different cultures. They were associated with many folklore, mythology, and superstitions in the Middle Ages. Depending on the culture, they saw owls as either the sign of death or an evil, fatal omen. And then there was other cultures that really saw them as a sign of protection. One way that we really saw it, so Shakespeare, he used owls in one of his most famous play, Macbeth, during the murder, again, of the main character in his play. He helped coin the saying night owl that people use today. The Zapotec people of Mexico, they saw them as a fatal omen, believed that it was probably due to their nocturnal habits. On the other side of the spectrum in England, they were killing the owls and they would hang them on their front doors. This was in hopes that it would keep their livestock safe, claiming that the owls had healing or protective powers. In Greek culture, they would use the barn owl eggs to make a soup, and it was believed that that soup was to help cure patients with epilepsy, as well as to help those who were alcoholics. So, depending on the culture, they have very different effect and belief on kind of a sign of what barn owl is meaning. So, on to distribution. They occupy many different types of habitats. They can include deserts, grasslands, forests, wetlands, farmland, and urban areas. The open land is extremely helpful to them because it helps them be more successful during hunting. And they are seen to hunt in the same area that they live in until their food source gets kind of scarce. They are non-migratory, and they are something called cavity nesters. So this just means that they build nests in unoccupied areas, cliffs, pre-made nests. It's why a lot of people see them in barns, because they tend to be pretty unoccupied, as well as abandoned churches, old houses, and things like that. They have been seen in New Zealand and Norfolk Island. So that is kind of confirming that they have the ability to cross oceans. Appearance and characteristics. So barn owls are seen to be 14 to 20 inches in length, with a wingspan of up to 4 feet. It's mainly recognized for its heart-shaped face with a big brown head and big eyes. The heart-shaped face is framed by brown feathers, and it contains a downward pointing bill. So the funny thing about that is I found through many of the resources I was using for this project that it coined kind of a pretty funny nickname, and this was really due to the prominent bill. A lot of people joke that it made the owl contain human-like features, so the nickname that it gained was monkey-faced owl. Believe it or not, I found this pretty interesting, especially with the fact that it has a 4 feet wingspan, is that barn owls are really only 1.5 pounds. For colors, they have a golden brown color on their upside, and then on their belly area, they either have a grayish white or a red underside. I did find a pretty cool fact about this, that the barn owls with the white grayish bellies were able to reflect moonlight onto their prey during hunting. And what this did is it would stun the rodent, and it would make them an easier catch, essentially, just make it more successful for their hunting. There was a study that was conducted proving that the owls with the gray whitish undersides froze bulls for a longer period of time compared to the red bellies. So I thought that was a pretty cool fun fact. When they are seen in the air, they have a flat-shaped tail that helps distinguish them from many other types of owls. Something that's kind of weird about the barn owls, they are a little bit different than the others. If you were to go around and ask pretty much anyone, what sound does an owl make? The first thing that people tend to say is like a hoo-hoo or a hooting noise. Barn owls actually have more of a eerie shriek or hissing noise, instead of that typical hoo-hoo. So I would definitely recommend looking up a video of it. Is definitely catches you off guard. And then they have a lifespan on average of 4 years. I was actually kind of shocked by this because it did feel pretty short. But there has been of course, with that exception to the rule, there I guess is an owl that lived up to 32 years old, which is insane. So that noises that they make are really helpful during times of defense. So getting an intruder near their nest out of the way. They tend to be very protective and territorial of their area. Right. So hunting and diet. The barn owl is a nocturnal hunter, so this meaning that it hunts at night. But this is really to their advantage because they can really easily see in low light situations. So owls' eyes are in the frontal position, and this allows them to have perfect three-dimensional vision. Their eyes are not spherical, they're tubular. So this stops their eyes from being able to move around like we can move ours so freely. And this really is just due to the large size of their cornea. On the lens, they can turn their head up to 270 degrees. This really is just if they can't move their eyes, they need some other way to be able to move around and see things. They perceive changes in light instead of seeing in color, which is pretty cool. So they have a heart-shaped facial disc, which is what we were talking about earlier. This actually helps funnel sound into their asymmetrical ears. And what that means is just one ear is a tad bit higher than the other. And this is really helpful for them to be able to locate and alert sounds of the prey. One ear perceives sound before the other does, which is pretty cool. And this can help their brain immediately calculate where the prey is located. And that is called directional hearing. 90% of their diet is rodents and other small mammals, so they are carnivores. And depending on where the barn owl is living, they rarely have been seen to eat fish as well as insects. And then on occasion, they will eat smaller birds. So barn owls can approach their prey very silently. That is a really big thing about owls, is how crazy of hunters they are. And it's really the ability of them being able to be almost utterly, completely silent. So they have special downy feathers on their wings and their legs that help contribute to that. Compared to smaller owls, barn owls have a higher metabolic rate. So they are seen to eat 14% of their body weight. And that really just means for their body to continue being in maintenance, they need to eat more to keep it at that point. Barn owls will continue to hunt in the same area until the food source that they are currently working with maybe kind of scares up. But they're also seen to go by nearby sources as long as it is relatively close to their area. So once an owl does capture their prey, they have been seen to swallow them whole. But that does make sense. If any of you guys remember at some point in elementary school, at least my school did this, where you dissected owl pellets and you could find like full like skeletons in there. So pretty interesting. So their social life. They tend to be pretty solitary, but they have been seen to be in pairs. They are not in favor of intruders, so they will go a great extent to protect and defend their home. They have a typical defense display, and that's like them spreading their wings out, lowering their head, and then kind of bobbing back and forth. During this, they typically follow that with their scary shrieking, so a pretty good intimidation. They are monogamous, and 75% of barn owls will stay with their mate. And there is a few reasons why they wouldn't. One being if their mate just dies, but the other being that if they're desperate because they're not making enough offspring, so then they will end up, quote unquote, going through a divorce. When it comes to them finding a mate, the male will go to a nesting site, and he will attract the female by calling out her. What will happen is once he gets her pretty nice and interested, he will go out, capture some food, and then bring it back to her. They tend to be, just said this earlier, they're cavity nesters. So a lot of where they are seen to do their nests is in like a tree hole. Once they have their area and they have mated, the female can lay 2 to 18 eggs. It is a very big range. And she will do this asynchronously. So what that means is just every 2 to 3 days. So the eggs will not all come out at the same time. Incubation is around 30 days, and then the hatching will happen over a prolonged time as well. The reason for that is really due to the fact that she didn't lay the eggs all at the same time. So they will hatch in the order that the eggs were laid. While the female is incubating, the male will go out and take care of capturing the food for her because she will no longer be hunting during that period. Once the eggs hatch, the mom will take care of the nest by cleaning up the chick's poop. Alrighty. Barn owls are the second distributed raptors behind the peregrine falcon, which is a pretty cool thing. So in terms of current status, their current status is at a state of decline. So they are not endangered, but their population is steadily decreasing. This really is due to human intervention. So things like deforestation, changes in cultivation, and the use of pesticides. The prey of owls are going to go out and eat the crops, and then they pass the chemicals to the owls once the owl eats them. The pesticides are causing weakened eggshells. So it's increasing the chance of the eggs cracking during incubation. So before the chicks are even ready to come out of their shell, creating a higher chance of failure for the eggs. Barn owls, the major cause of death for them is actually not even the pesticides, but them getting hit by cars, which is pretty interesting. So that is making a pretty big dent in their population. Their population is stable, but people are trying to do their best to keep it that way. So they're going out and doing things like providing nest boxes in areas of deforestation. And that is it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica, for that. Does anybody have questions about barn owls? Ronit, I see your hand, and then Kinley, you're next.
Yeah, I have a couple. One is, you mentioned that it was problematic that they're being found in New Zealand. Are they threatening to endemic species there? Is that the issue there?
Sorry, no. So it's not threatening that they're there. It was more that they were found there. So people were confirming that they can travel distances over the oceans.
Oh, okay. So it's just like, we know they can fly a ways.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And what is it about cars? Are they eating on the road, or are they flying low and getting hit by cars?
So that was something that I was interested in. I was trying to look up stuff like that because I had to say I was surprised that that was denting their population more than the pesticides. But I heard that sometimes it can increase more when it's becoming darker earlier in the days. So they're out hunting around near trash and things on the side of the road, so that ends up becoming an accident. So I think it's probably more of an issue when we go through those time changes and it starts getting darker earlier in the seasons.
Okay, Kinley, go ahead.
So Jess, I did actually look up the barn owl noise, and the way I can describe it is like a little human child screaming. It is the weirdest noise. It's so cute though. Is that how you describe it, Jess?
It is like blood curdling.
It is like you have to turn down your volume when you listen to it. It's just like, oh my god, it's so funny. It's cute though. It's just, they're so adorable.
Hang on. hang on. Let me see if I can zoom. That's not Zoom. Zoom. Can you guys hear that? No. Oh, it's too bad. Okay. Yeah, sometimes when I screen share, it doesn't, the sound doesn't come through, and sometimes it does, and I don't know why. But yes, you should absolutely listen to it. And yes,
Is it set to share your sound?
what do you mean set to share my sound?
When you go to screen share at the bottom of the window where you choose what you're sharing, on the bottom left, there should be like a share sound and optimize for video clip.
Yeah. Share sound. Thank you, Ronit. We'll try this one again. Okay. Oh, I learned something today. Yeah, that's one of those animals when we would get barn owls in rehab. We usually would get them in when people cut down trees with a nest in it. Because for some reason, people, don't pay attention to breeding season when they decide when to cut down trees. And we could always tell because we could hear the baby screaming. All right, any other questions?
Do the babies sound basically the same?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. One interesting thing, when I was doing rehab, the almond orchards out here started to switch from using pesticides to putting up barn owl boxes because it was shown that barn owls did a better job of protecting the almond trees from these little burrowing rodents, a type of gopher. They did a better job than pesticides did. So I assume they're still doing that. If it works, it's also cheap. Okay. Did I have somebody else who needed to go today? All right. In that case, we'll go back to me.
You got it, Mary Kate. You're gonna do it awesome.
What am I missing? Did Mary Kate say she was going to do it?
Yeah, she said she was a little nervous, but I wanted to tell her she can do it. She's gonna do great.
Oh, absolutely. Mary Kate, are you ready today?
Yes. Couldn't get
Okay.
her to work.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make you a co-host. Wait a minute. Mary Kate. Make co-host. There we go. And you should now have the opportunity to share your screen with the rest of us.
Okay, let me just see if I can get my thing to work. Can you see it?
Yep. We can see it.
So I did the same as Jessica and the barn owl. This is just an overview of a barn owl. They are pretty tall, head to tail. Their most of the females have spotted chest. That's how you pretty much can tell if it's a female or a male. This is another really good picture that I saw. It shows a lot of like their feet and how their like claws are zoomed in. And then the barn owl looking upside down as they can turn their heads 270 degrees. So the barn owl's hunting. They normally eat 3 to 4 preys a night. During the breeding season, the barn owls will find this amount for each owlet and themselves. So that's a lot of food. This works out to most 4,000 prey items a year to feed a pair of their offsprings. They hunt pretty much in grassy, like rough grasslands that provide a lot of shelter for the rats and mice that they hunt for. I guess the owl is like a challenge when they're going for hunting. They also like it because the mice can easily reproduce and like build up the amount of food, and then the owls have more of a chance to get something. And then they're generally active at dusk and dawn because they don't need like their eyesight too much to hunt, because they rely mostly on their sound and echolocation for their prey. And more on the hunting, these are different pellets that the different owls make. The barn owls look like they make a lot bigger. Their pellets are mostly made up of bones, teeth, and hair, and feathers, scales, or insects, whatever they pretty much eat at the time. They regurgitate it out of their mouth. And I actually dissected a barn owl pellet when I was in high school. It was the best thing in the entire world to do because it was very fun, and I found a mouse skull, but I lost it. I don't know where I put it. And barn owl on their wings, little information, they are silent flights because they don't want to make a noise when they're gliding across the grassland to get the mice. Their size is very big, and it like shows how quiet they can fly. They are specially adapted feathers, and they are not particularly waterproof. They are unable to store a lot of body fat. It means that they are unable to hunt in heavy rain and are particularly prone to starvation during prolonged severe weather and or prey shortage. This picture really shows a good picture of like how their wings are and how so many feathers of like the primary, secondary, and forget the name of the ones that are closer to the body, but how they're so like spread out, and it when they fly, the wind goes faster over the top and slower over the bottom, so they have to like when they flap, it goes like over and under of their wings, so like the feathers help a lot to like pick up the lift and the flight and how fast they go. And this is a cute picture of how the eyesight is. I think oh no, I didn't. This was supposed to have a little name tag up here, but I don't know where it went. But this is eyesight for owls. They are nocturnal species, So they are basically night flyers, and they can basically see better at night than in the day. They have poor color vision. They're capable of seeing in UV light at night. Rodent urine glows under UV light. That's also how they find their prey. And then it helps improve their vision. It helps stabilize the eyes and the head during flight. The shapes of the ring can indicate if a bird is daytime or nocturnal. And it also helps because the bird, this is why the owls can turn their heads for 270 degrees, a third of the way around. And then this tree has a lot of animals on it, but the frontal orientated eyes, they have like 70-degree in the middle, and then it can go out more. So binocular vision would be only in the middle, and then the monocular vision on the sides. This is another picture of like eye shapes of the barn owl and the chicken. It shows a difference. This is on hearing. This is their ears, how they are asymmetrical. One's up more, one's down more. This allows them to determine the direction of the sound they can use to help them find small rodents at night. Birds can differentiate between similar sounds better than we can. They can distinguish different voices in their flock. And owls can regrow their structure that are involved in hearing at these frequencies, and we can't. So they have way better hearing than we do. And then the neck, how they can turn their head 270 degrees, it's because they have 14 vertebrae and we have 7, so they're more easy. It links the head a little bit more so they can turn it. And it also has the owl skull have one groove that allows their head to swivel. We have 2. And their flexible neck helps them see in all directions. And then I just stick a video and show them how they fly.
What does it take for Lily to get airborne? To find out, Lloyd and Rose have enlisted the help of bird expert, Professor. For a bird to take to the air, it has to overcome 2 forces. Gravity, the invisible pull that keeps us grounded, and drag, which is the resistance we experience as we move through the air. Birds use their wings to create lift and thrust. But how do they do it? Birds' wings are the shape of an airfoil. Air traveling over the top of the wing has to travel faster than air traveling beneath. This creates a difference in air pressure, which generates lift. To gain forward momentum, birds flap their wings. This makes the air flowing over them spiral off the trailing edge. These vortices thrust the bird forwards and upwards. These are the basic principles of all flight. But what's so unique about the way owls fly?
We fly quite a few different types of bird, of varying sizes. But the one thing I notice about the owls is they always appear to be a lot slower than they're flying than the other birds. Well, all birds have got different wing shapes and they can fly at different speeds. It's just like aircraft. So if you look at the wing size of a barn owl, it's actually got a very big wing, and so they can fly very slow, very controlled.
To really understand the barn owl's slow flight, Lloyd's putting Lily to the test against two of his other birds. Maisie, the grey-lag goose, a long-distance endurance flyer. And Moses, the peregrine falcon, one of the fastest birds on earth. The peregrine takes the lead. Its long and pointed wings are quite flat, designed for speed and maneuverability, which it needs to hunt. The goose is next. Weighing 3 kilograms, its relatively short and narrow wings work hard to get it airborne. The barn owl has the largest wings in relation to its body, and its airfoil is very curved, which generates a huge amount of lift. So the barn owl can fly slower and with fewer wing beats than most other birds.
Yes, yeah.
So that was just like also an kind of an understanding of how the birds' wings fly and how they are slow and are very silent flyers. And then I also have a video on a barn owl eating, which is how they eat. This is how they eat whole, and how this is their nest basically inside of a tree that they usually build. They don't build nests like the normal birds do, like with their like straw and like grass. They build it more inside of like hollow trees and under barns, just to keep away from like the weather and make sure their chicks can hatch. And the bird ate the mouse whole, one whole bite. And that's it. Oh, and I think that's it. And then my reference page.
Okay. Thank you, Mary Kate.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions on Mary Kate's?
Yeah, did the babies eat the same size mice in one bite?
No. I think the parents find like smaller ones, like maybe of like the baby size pinkies, and then give them. But as they grow older, they definitely can eat that big of much.
Yeah, Jessica said in the chat that mom rips them up too. Yeah, absolutely. Mom can also tear off pieces of flesh, or dad. Any other questions? All right. I'm pretty sure.
Question, why are these all good presentations? They're all really good. Like, I mean, it's just like, I don't have any questions, but I mean, like, that's like the main questions. Like, these are really good. I
Yep,
kind of want to put up barn owl, but I mean, I think I wasn't, see, that's the thing, because I was thinking it was a barn owl. I'll see if to find the photo, you might know, because it was just cool, because it was that night. And I thought it was a spider. So I was like, what is that? And then I looked closer, it was an owl. I was like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. Thanks for that comment, Laura.
No problem. Good job, guys.
Yep. Good job, guys. All right. So we've been talking about wildlife rehabilitation. And this is the facility where I worked doing wildlife rehabilitation. When we talk about wildlife rehabilitation, there are organizations that do this, and there are individuals who do it in their homes. So organizations are largely funded by donations, and generally they're going to have either a part-time or full-time veterinarian who is a specialist in wildlife. They're going to have a couple of one or more full-timers and lots of volunteers. So these kinds of facilities, because they have paid staff and a veterinarian on site, are more likely to be able to handle things like the dangerous animals, the rabies vector species, the endangered animals, and animals that need really intensive veterinary care. If you're trying to do this in your home, a lot of people who do that, the funding for it basically comes right out of their pocket. And these people need to have a really good relationship with a vet, because you're going to get animals that need veterinary care. Not all vets are good at handling wild animals. So we certainly had animals that would come to our facility from a vet's office. And we always hated this when it happened, because the vets are well-meaning. They assume that wild animals are a lot like dogs and cats, and they're not. And a lot of times there would be complications because of this. They would, get a baby deer in and feed it the wrong food. Baby deer cannot eat dog milk replacement or cat milk replacement or goat milk. It needs to be a special product. So it's something that needs to be considered. If you're wanting to do this, you need to have a separate space to do it. So you don't want to do it in your living room. You don't want your pets to interact with wildlife that you have. They're not going to appreciate the television being loud or your music being loud or anything like that, or your neighbors being loud. Rehabbers who do things at home tend to do lots of baby animals. So you can rehab baby squirrels, baby possums at home pretty easily. Those animals do pretty well in wildlife rehab. They have high survival rates once they're overall and even after they're released. And this is the type of facility that has the best luck with rabbits. It's an individual who does it at home. And we talked about this and how rabbits can get used to one person and still be afraid of everybody else. And so people who do rabbits at home, that's one of the big reasons for their success. Most rehabbers who do rabbits at homes also have a pet rabbit. And I didn't mention this, but rabbits have to get the right kind of bacteria in their digestive tract in order to digest their food. And the way they do this is eating their mother's poop. So we all go gross. but rabbits produce a special type of poop that is designed for other rabbits to eat so that they can get the bacteria in their gut. So if you're raising rabbits at home, you got to have a pet rabbit to supply that. People who do things at home do not do good work with more difficult species, especially things like predatory species or deer fawns. They will sometimes also break the law and take in species that they are not legally allowed to raise. This is not as likely if you found them through state fish and wildlife, but if you find them through animal control or a veterinarian, yeah, that might be the case. This is especially true in states where certain species are not allowed to be rehabilitated. So a lot of states will not allow you to rehabilitate things like raccoons. Raccoons are a particularly problematic species. Not only can they carry rabies, they also carry a parasitic worm that is incredibly hard to kill. So if you're cleaning their cages, bleach ain't gonna do it. And this parasitic worm, if it gets into a person, will often find itself in the person's brain, and it will form a structure called a cyst inside the brain, which protects the parasite, but also damages the surrounding brain tissue. So I know of a case in a state where raising raccoons was not allowed by average members of the public or by rehabbers. And there was a woman who was doing it anyway. She was raising baby raccoons because baby raccoons are cute and nobody wants to euthanize them, but it was illegal to raise them. And the state found out when her son and one of her son's friends both showed up with this parasitic roundworm in their brains, and both of them had permanent neurological damage. So even though it might break your heart to not be able to raise an orphan baby raccoon, if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. I know this is a bird class and I'm getting the side on mammals, but mammals are the bigger problem in wildlife rehab, except for people kidnapping fledglings. Generally speaking, rehabbers will last for about 5 years and then burn out. The pay is crap. The hours are long. And the emotional toll is also very high because you lose a lot of animals, and it's very hard emotionally to tolerate that for very long. People who get into wildlife rehab do it because they love animals. Okay, I'm going to skip a couple of sections in the notes because we're getting down to the end of the semester and we're running low on time. And a lot of this stuff I've repeated, I've said before. If you have birds in rehab, you're going to need outside caging. And outside caging is going to need to be relatively large. So a bird cage is not going to do it outside, except for hummingbirds. You can put hummingbirds in a standard bird cage outside. Not the little tiny ones you get at the pet store, but a good sized one. Birds have to have enough space to fly. They need to build up their muscles, and they need to get used to the environment, the weather. If they've been indoors, they may not be as used to hot or cold weather, and they need to have that exposure to get used to it. You do need to have some protection from the weather, but not as much as for a pet bird. And yeah, okay. So when we're talking baby birds in rehab, they all have their special needs. So these are hatchlings. Hatchlings are, you've still got some naked skin on them. These guys actually have their eyes open, but when altrical baby birds first hatch, their eyes will still be closed. You can really see how big they can open their beaks. And up here on the top one, you can see the folds of that gape flange that we've talked about. That's a good sign that this is a baby. These guys, even though they have feathers, they're nestlings. They are probably just a day or two from becoming fledglings and climbing out of the nest. With hatchlings, you need an incubator. Keep them warm. You need to make sure that they stay hydrated. We talked about this with hand rearing baby birds. Wild birds, it's the same thing. You'll start them out on a liquid diet. They'll need to get supplemental watering periodically. Just like captive birds, they may need to be fed as often as every 15 minutes. One of the tricky things about dealing with wild birds is you have to identify the species. Different species eat different things. Even if they're all songbirds, they might have slightly different diets. Baby birds need more protein than adults, so you're going to have to give them something like mealworms. Young nestlings, relatively easy. They'll often take food from the rehabber. They still need to be warm, but they don't necessarily need to be in an incubator. If birds come in as a fledgling, by the time they're fledglings, they know who mom and dad are, and they know that you are not mom and dad. And it can be very, very hard to get fledgling birds to eat. So if a bird is in a nest, if it's still a nestling, if something comes up to the nest, it's either mom, dad, or a predator. And there's nothing the baby bird can do if it's a predator. So the best response is to assume that it's mom and dad and ask for food. If you're a fledgling and something comes up to you, you're not in a protected hidden little nest somewhere. So it's more likely that something that comes up to you would be a predator. So you change your response. And the anti-predator response is to hold very, very, very still. When a fledgling comes into wildlife rehab, people are the predators. So you may have to pry the beak open, which is tricky to do without damaging the beak. The beak is covered with skin. At this point, though, they should be able to take solid foods. Liquid food is, if you know what you're doing, fast and easy to feed, but you can start getting them on solid food when they're fledglings. And at this point, it's going to be even more species specific. So you're going to have different diets for different groups of birds depending on what they eat. Raptors in particular need prey items. They need meat. So you can buy frozen mice and frozen rats in bulk. Some people raise their own. A lot of people get them from a supplier. Can birds get tapeworm? I don't think they can get the same tapeworm that your dog and cat can get, but there is a bird tapeworm. Yes.
What, is that the one that's usually you get from undercooked meat, right? Yeah.
That's the one that what?
Isn't that like you can get tapeworm from like the meat, the raw meat, or like meat that's not cooked, right?
Usually when we're talking about meat, we're talking about, for pork, it's trichinella, which is not tapeworm. Other kinds of meats, it can be toxoplasmosis. There's,
With certain beef, it is for tapeworms
is it,
and bear.
and bear? Okay, yeah, I can see. I
So
can-
like, when you're talking about raptors, you'd have to be careful about that, right?
I don't think they can get mammalian tapeworms. I don't think they can get a tapeworm from a rat or a mouse.
Huh, interesting.
They
Okay.
can get tapeworms from other birds.
I believe they could from the fish that they could eat also.
Yep,
I
yep.
was thinking, yeah, well, I mean, if the fish is infected, yeah, but I mean,
Yeah, that's the tapeworm is a broad term for a bunch of different species. And I don't know exactly which species can infect what organisms. So I don't know how much.
I only know the one that does dog because I just did an essay on that one, but I mean, I was just wondering in general if like they could get like raptors in general could get tapeworm from undercooked meat or like eating something that has it.
I know they can get it if they prey on birds, and a lot of raptors do prey on smaller birds.
Yeah, okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Mice and rats feeding to raptors. When the birds are really young, if you're raising baby raptors, they might not be able to handle the skin. So you may have to skin the mice or rats and then chop them up into bite-sized pieces. It's disturbing. And even more disturbing is how fast you get comfortable doing this.
I mean, I was just gonna say that's kind of cute, but it's disgusting at the same time.
Yeah, it is cute and disgusting at the same time. One of my favorite moments was after I had taught some volunteers to skin rats. And the way I learned to do it, you could get basically the whole skin, almost the whole skin off the rat in one piece.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
And I caught one of the women, and you know, petite, skinny little thing, always had nice hair and makeup and nails and all of that stuff, married to a Hollywood producer. I mean,
Oh,
she
wow.
rich in, yeah, very rich. And I caught her, and she had skinned some rats, and she was putting on a little puppet show with the skins.
That's awesome. That's crazy.
It's disturbing and funny at the same time.
I laugh at it, but then I feel bad.
It can be a challenge to get them used to natural foods. Most rehabbers don't have time to go out and get locally sourced natural foods for their birds. To some degree, there's some that you can do, but there's a limit. So in order to get around this, generally speaking, people will do what's called a soft release. So this is an outdoor enclosure. This one is actually for squirrels, but it would certainly work for birds as well. You'll notice it has a solid roof with a little bit of an overhang. It has a protective nest box. soft release is the best option for baby birds. And what you do is you have the babies in an outdoor enclosure like this, a flight or pre-release cage, and you start using a bird feeder, just a typical bird feeder that you would buy at Home Depot or Lowe's. And you provide food and water inside the cage. This is for songbirds specifically. And then you hang a bird feeder outside the cage, and you provide that bird feeder and water outside the flight cage. Local wild birds will come around. If the rehab birds are lucky, you'll see adults of the same species. And they can learn how to behave by watching the adults of their species. Then you open the door and they've got food there outside the cage, and eventually they'll disperse, usually around migration season. How do you stop squirrels from hogging the food? There's a couple of different tricks. We'll talk about that when we talk about enjoying wild birds. That's what I'm calling the lecture. Bird watching and feeding. Some species, cedar waxwings, which don't tend to come to bird feeders. Chimney swifts, which only catch food in flight. If you have those babies, you need to find a flock of adults. Those species live in flock most of the year. They're very, very social, and young birds learn from adults. So if you've got a chimney swift, you've raised the chimney swift in captivity, you go out, you find a flock of chimney swifts, and you literally take that bird that you've got, that you've raised, hopefully it's learned a little bit about how to fly, you throw it up in the air. It's one of the craziest freaking things you'll ever do. You literally throw it up into the air, and usually what happens is the adults will come down, and then it will disappear into the flock. So when we talk about rehabilitation, there are some significant problems. And birds that have been in rehab may have issues after release. So, for example, migration. Most songbirds, most of the common species that you get in rehab are basically instinctive about migration. And they can manage on their own. But species like jays and crows that spend more than a year with their parents, they may need to follow adults to migrate. And you're not going to be able to teach them that. If the species needs that kind of support, they need to go to a facility or a specialist. A facility will know if they have the ability to do it, and if they don't, they'll know who does have the ability to do it. Most species of baby birds have a little bit of an instinct for singing, but it's not going to be perfect, and they learn by listening to adults. So again, if it's a common species and you've got them in one of these outside enclosures, that cage being outside, hearing their own species singing will help with that. When we talk about species that need to learn from others of their species, there are several different ways to deal with it. So one of the things is if you've got crows, generally speaking, if you're in an area with a lot of crows, you're going to get a lot of crows. And they seem to do okay if you release a bunch of them together. So this, you release 6 crows together and they kind of start to form their own flock, especially if they've been in a pre-release cage together. And they can learn from each other and teach to each other. They seem to do okay. Ravens have to go to a family group. I think I talked about this already. Birds of prey, hawks and owls, they have to learn how to hunt. So that's really going to need, baby raptors are really going to need to go to a specialist. And the best specialists for baby bird, for raptors will often have non-releasable adults. And basically they have the non-releasable adults do the job. You get an adult owl or hawk who, maybe they can't fly, maybe they're blind in one eye, maybe they lost a foot, something like that. They can still kind of help raise the baby. And those babies do a lot better. Okay. So I was going to talk about several of the common injuries, but I think we're just going to kind of skim through this or largely skip it, because we've talked about healthcare for pet birds, and a lot of the problems that pet birds get, you see in adult birds. What are you in wild birds? The big difference with wild birds is cats, cats, cats. That is something you don't usually see with pets, and it requires antibiotics. So this bird was hit by a car. You can see it's got an anesthesia mask here. This is paper tape holding the bird and legs in place. And you can see that this wing was broken in 3 different spots. And this leg was broken. So this was a hit by car. When you're dealing with broken bones, especially wing bones in wild birds, the location and the severity of the break will determine if the bird can recover. I don't know about this one because it's such a severe series of breaks here. I wouldn't worry so much about the leg, although this looks like a raptor based on the toenails, maybe. But if a break is too close to a joint, so say the break is like right here at this joint or right here at this joint, to repair the break, you have to put a metal pin down the center of the bone to hold the bone in place. If the break is very close to a joint, a lot of times the scar tissue around that wound will do what's called freezing or locking the joint, and the bird will not have as much range of motion as it needs to fly. So a break that involves a joint or is too close to a joint is basically not repairable in wild birds. And that's the last thing we're going to talk about on this topic is non-releasable birds. So when we talk about non-releasable birds, this is a bird blind in one eye, got a wing that broke at one of those joints, and that sort of stuff. You have to evaluate the species and personality of the individual bird. Some birds do well in captivity. They adapt to it. And some birds and some species do not adapt well. So first off, we can talk about birds becoming education birds. Once again, permits are required. These are not easy to get. So there are not a lot of wild birds kept as education birds. And there are people who go, well, I'll get a permit for an education bird and just not do education. No, they keep track of that. If you're not actively using the bird for education purposes, they're going to pull your permit. Zoos and science museums. Again, there are permits required. Here's the tricky part with this. Zoos often do not have an opening for a non-releasable bird. So they may be willing and able to take one, and then they have one, and then they don't have room for more. So there's spaces are limited. And again, you've got to have a bird that's comfortable with people. And a lot of zoos will take charismatic birds like hawks and owls, especially bald eagles. Bald eagles are pretty easy to place. But if you've got a robin, probably nobody's going to want that. The vast majority of birds that cannot be released for one reason or another are euthanized. I know we had a conversation about this recently in this class. Euthanasia literally means good death. And frankly, for a lot of these animals, it is the best option. Some individuals and some species are never going to be comfortable in captivity. They're going to be stressed and miserable, and why put them through that? So euthanasia is an option. What I want to talk about here is you cannot bury an animal that was euthanized. The euthanasia stays in the body. So generally speaking, if you've got a facility or you do a lot of rehab, you'll need a dedicated freezer to store the bodies in. Depending on what you work with, you may be able to donate them to a local natural history museum. So you'd be amazed how many birds natural history museums have behind the public areas. They have cabinets and cabinets full of birds. Bird skins, bird skeletons, bird eggs, you name it. They have huge amounts of that. Generally speaking, they're not going to take pigeons because they've got plenty of pigeons. But they'll take a lot of other things, and in relatively large numbers. Sometimes you can find a place that will take pigeons so that people who are interested in learning how to do taxidermy, to prepare skins and specimens of birds, have something to practice on. Because there are lots of pigeons, a lot of them show up in rehab, and if the Natural History Museum trains people, they might be able to use those. Eagles, as we know by now, must go to the federal government. So their feathers can be used in Native American ceremonies. So that still leaves mammals, which most Well, some natural history museums will take some of them, but usually not as many as they'll take birds. So generally, you need to find a local animal shelter who will take and cremate the remains. And there's usually a fee involved in that. Okay. Are there any questions on wildlife rehabilitation? Kinley, go ahead.
So I smiled because I also done a project on euthanasia, and that's probably the most. That is the most kind of, people have different opinions about that. That's like a really rough topic. And I think is there, what has to be the ground rules of euthanizing an animal, do you think? Because that's like never really, I don't think any like any way to say it's never correct fully, but
Right. For pets, it's very tricky. But for pets are they suffering? And is there any chance of them not suffering in the future? And if they're suffering and there's no chance of them getting better, that's my personal threshold. With wildlife, is the animal capable of recovering and being released? If it's not, is there a potential place for it? And does it have a personality that will allow it to live a relatively low stress life in captivity? Because some animals never will. And being in captivity would be basically torture for them.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there are more animals that would do okay in captivity than there are places for them. And then it's kind of like, it's not a good choice, but there's just not another choice. Anything else you guys want to know? Okay. Next time we're going to talk about things like bird watching and feeding birds and attracting them to your backyard and that sort of stuff. Happier topics. All right, guys, have a good weekend.